2.5 years ago, I dropped out of college and now I'm an online fitness coach. So, in this video, I just want to walk you guys through the past 2.5 years of my life. Walk you guys through the struggles, the losses, the wins, and give you guys a story to exactly where I am in this point in my life. So, around 2.5 years ago, August 2023, I went to college to play college football. I got a little scholarship to go play D3 football for a school. And growing up all the way to that point, that was my dream. That is what I thought I wanted to do. But up until that point, I had never looked past that. I didn't know what I was going to do after that. College is where it was going to end. I didn't really think about that until I got to that point. So, I get to college, I started doing all the things, and I feel this urging and this calling that this is not where I was meant to be. I didn't know what that calling or that urging was, like I'll get to later on in the video, but looking back on it, that was God calling me out of that season. But I didn't know that was God because I did not want anything to do with God. I still believed, I still called myself a Christian, but I was living for the world. So I didn't know that was God calling me out of that season. So a month in, I pulled the trigger. I dropped out, I stopped playing college football for the school. I moved back to a small town in Colorado where I went to high school. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know why I was doing this, but again, I knew I wasn't supposed to be there, and that is where my sports journey ended. And you would think, listen back to it, you feel that urging and that calling from what I now know to be was God calling me out of that season. You would think once I leave that, I would go and search for God, search for answers. Absolutely not. That is not what I did. It took me another year to actually pursue Christ. And for that year after I dropped out of college, I was just trying to find myself. I was trying to figure out why I was here, what was my purpose here on this earth. And I genuinely had no idea. I knew I had all of these different passions. I was passionate about so many different things and I wanted to try and do so many different things, but I can never just decide on one. I had no idea what my calling was. Whether I was public about it or private about it, I guarantee you I have tried every single thing that you can think of. And seriously, if anybody takes anything away from this video, it is go try new things. You are never going to find out what your purpose is or what your calling is if you don't go out and try new things and expand your horizons. Let go of the fear, let go of the judgment from other people, because that is genuinely what holds 99% of people back from finding their calling nowadays. Let go of the fear of judgment and go try new things and figure out why you were planted here on this earth. So for the next year, I'm trying to find myself. I'm struggling to find myself. And just like any kid trying to find his higher purpose, he's stuck doing things that he does not want to do. For that next year, year and a half, I was working jobs I hated. I was working for FedEx. It felt like I was a robot in a warehouse, and I worked there for over a year. I worked as a produce clerk in my hometown. And if anybody has ever done something similar to that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And in my situation, it was awful for me. And from the outside looking in, you see this kid drop out of college after a month in, after getting a scholarship to go play football, something a lot of kids dream about, and I am extremely grateful that I got that opportunity. But looking on the outside in, you see that and you see him move back to his hometown, and then you see him working at a produce clerk at a grocery store. And I'm still in that new phase of trying new things out, and I have insane fear of judgment. I'm still putting things out. I'm still trying new things and putting myself out there to try to find myself. But the fear that I had of other people judging me was insane. And just imagine that. I'm a produce clerk working at a grocery store after I just dropped out of college, looking like he has no plan in the world, running into old coaches, friends, people I went to high school with. My self-esteem was at an all-time low. And genuinely, the only thing that kept me pushing and kept me moving forward was knowing that I was just following a calling and an urging that I felt inside. And honestly, the sad reality of it is, I chose to do that and it was the right decision, but because of that, I lost friends. I lost a lot of relationships that I was in. And even at the time, I did not understand that. I didn't know why I was losing all these things in my life, and my life was genuinely falling apart all around me just to go walk a path where I had no idea what was in front of me. So fast forward to about 8 months ago, I decide to leave my hometown. Everybody you see on social media, they're saying, leave your hometown if you want to be successful. Leave your hometown if you want to grow. Listen to them. They are completely right. I had the idea to move to Arizona, move in with a guy I went to high school with down here, and I made that decision, made it all happen, all in the span of 2 months, because I was so desperate for growth and to see the next phase of my life and what God had planned for me. So I made that decision, I made all that happen, and by this point, I was already actively chasing God. I started pursuing Christ, after everyone that I know in my hometown, they left. They were at college, they were doing their own thing, they were working. I was genuinely isolated, not even in like solitude. I was isolated from everything for 6 months. For 6 months, I saw no one except my family. And in those 6 months, that is where I discovered that urging and that calling I had was from God. So I pursued it. Nothing else in my life was working at the time. So the only thing I had left to do was to pursue God. And that is genuinely the one thing that changed my life. I want you to hear me when I say this. Jesus Christ will change your life when you actively make the decision to pursue Him. So I made that decision. I started actively working out my faith every single day. And I was put into a season of isolation where it was only me and God. And I came out of that season of isolation. I made the decision to move down here to Arizona. I've been living here for the last 8 months, and it wasn't until the last 3 months that I decided to become an online fitness coach. And I'm going to get into exactly why I decided to do that, what led me to do that. Fitness in general and working out and taking care of your body has always been one of the biggest parts of my life ever since I started lifting in high school. I didn't really understand it at first, just like everybody else. I didn't know what I was doing, but I loved the action and the responsibility of putting yourself through physical discipline to grow your body, to grow your mind, to grow your spirit, and actively taking care of your body for a consistent amount of time. I love that. I love the early morning and the late night lifts with all my guys back in high school. That gave me joy. But I always looked at the gym and training and all that stuff as something you had to do for something else. All the way from high school to college, I looked at training and lifting in the gym as just something you had to do for the sport. I never realized how big and impactful training in the gym could really be, like the way I see it now. So again, I moved down to Arizona, and fitness is still a very big part of my life, but I go through this phase again where I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I made this huge decision in a span of 2 months to leave my hometown, move to a whole different state without any experience doing any of that. And for a couple months, I genuinely just fell off. Wasn't going to the gym, wasn't taking care of my diet. And I was just asking God, why did you bring me down here? What am I supposed to do? And now I get to the point where I have a complete breakdown. One night I just snapped. For the first time in 2 years, I cried. I was at the point where I felt like I made the completely wrong decision moving down to AZ. I felt like I was a complete fool and that I was not doing anything right. I felt like I had misunderstood God's will for my life. So just to kind of paint the scene for you guys. I'm on my bedroom floor, tears on my face, and I'm just asking God, I surrender everything to you. What do you want me to do next? And I just keep repeating that. And the answer didn't come until 2 days later, but I was walking into my apartment, and it wasn't an audible voice, but I heard a voice. It was almost like an insight. And that voice said, start a Bible study. So, I was like, all right, I don't have anything to lose. I'm going to go call up a couple of my guys, and I'm going to start this Bible study. So, I did that for the next 2 months. And I realized I genuinely love, first of all, talking about God, but also leading a group of men that are trying to actively better themselves and pursuing their fullest potential. I found complete fulfillment in that. And, by this time, I was really locking back in. I was getting in the gym consistently, taking care of my diet, all of that. And that is when I made the decision to really lock in on online fitness coaching. It is like genuinely the best of both worlds for me. And on this side, I'm passionate about fitness. I love training in the gym. And then on this side, I love coaching people. I love leading other men. And then I figured out there was a way where you could combine the two. And then that brings me to where I am right now. I run an online fitness coaching business. The name of my program is Project Revival, and I named it that because my entire goal of this program is to not only revive a man's physique, but is to revive a man's mind, mentality, their faith, and their confidence in themselves. That's how I designed the program and everything we do in the training. There's custom workout plans for each person to make sure they're getting their desired physique, but there's also things that I'm adding in like group Bible study. There's habit builders and breakers. Genuinely everything I wish I would have had and had access to when I was first starting out. And that's how I became an online fitness coach. And if you are interested in wanting to apply to Project Revival and one-on-one coaching, just hit the link in the description and I will personally reach out to you and see if you're a good fit. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.